Pregnant wife sees Millionaire bring Mistress home. She turns away in fury while he panics. High above the bustling streets of Manhattan, two lives poised on the brink of collapse and betrayal. For years, Damon Blackwood ruled his world with wealth, charm, and an impenetrable facade that shielded him from the consequences of his own desires. His wife, Eleanor Martin Blackwood, clung to the belief that true love could triumph over social divides and ruthless ambition. Yet tonight, all illusions shatter. Damon escorts his stunning mistress into the very home Eleanor once believed was her sanctuary. Flames of fury spark in Elena's eyes as she turns away, leaving Damon frozen in panic. In that instant, everything changes forever. Elena Martin was never supposed to marry a millionaire. Raised in a modest household on the outskirts of Queens, she learned the value of hard work and the importance of family bonds. Her father, Gabriel Martin, was a school bus driver, and her mother, Lucia, made ends meet by working at a local bakery. Money was scarce, but affection and mutual support were abundant. Elena's childhood was filled with simple joys, playing hopscotch on cracked sidewalks, sharing homemade empanadas with neighbors, and dreaming about one day becoming an artist or a teacher, anything that could serve her community. Damon Blackwood's world was the polar opposite. Born into old money with deep roots in Manhattan's social elite, he attended prestigious prep schools, flew around the world in private jets, and viewed success as an expectation rather than a goal. Though the Blackwood fortune originated from real estate, Damon expanded it through daring tech investments in Silicon Valley. By 30, he had multiplied his inheritance several times over, gaining a reputation for both cunning and charm. Their paths first crossed at a charity fundraiser organized by the Friedman Foundation, a philanthropic event aimed at funding educational scholarships for underprivileged kids. Elena had volunteered to help with event logistics, hoping her bilingual skills could be of use. She believed passionately in giving back to the children whose struggles mirrored her own humble beginnings. Damon attended as one of the top donors, breezing in with his trademark confidence. The two collided, literally, when Eleanor stumbled while carrying a tray of drinks. Glass shattered at Damon's feet. Instead of berating her, he knelt to help clean up, surprising everyone present. In that moment, Eleanor saw not a ruthless millionaire, but a man capable of genuine kindness. Conversation flowed effortlessly once the awkwardness passed. He teased her about how fate apparently wanted them to meet. She felt an unexplainable spark that neither had ever experienced before. Within weeks, Damon pursued Elena with a laser-like focus. Lavish dinners, thoughtful gifts, long walks in Central Park. He presented himself as a man yearning for a deeper connection than the superficial relationships he had known. Although Elena felt uneasy about the drastic difference in their worlds, she couldn't deny her growing affection for him. He promised that love mattered more than any gap in status or bank accounts. Against her family's cautious advice, she allowed herself to be swept up in the whirlwind romance. When Damon proposed under a starlit sky on the deck of a yacht, complete with a diamond ring that dwarfed anything Elena had imagined, she said yes, tears of joy streaming down her face. She believed wholeheartedly in the fairy tale that their love was a bridge strong enough to unite two vastly different backgrounds. Even Damon's mother, Beatrice Blackwood, who wore disapproval like a second skin, seemed grudgingly resigned to the union. For a moment it felt like Elena had truly found her own happily ever after. Little did she know how quickly illusions can crumble when tested by ambition, temptation, and the secrets of a man whose heart might not be as pure as she once believed. After the fairy tale wedding, a grand affair at the Blackwood estate overlooking the Hudson, Elena moved into Damon's luxurious penthouse in Midtown Manhattan. The building itself was a fortress of gleaming glass and steel, symbolizing everything Elena's old life was not. At first, she felt awed by the high ceilings, panoramic city views, and state-of-the-art security. But soon, her wonder gave way to an unsettling sensation of being trapped in a gilded cage. Life as Mrs. Damon Blackwood brought immediate notoriety. Paparazzi snapped photos whenever she emerged from the penthouse. Tabloids speculated about her humble background and how lucky she was to snag a billionaire husband. Elena tried to shrug off the gossip, focusing on her volunteer work at local community centers. She aimed to bring resources and hope to kids in struggling neighborhoods, kids like she once was. Yet, beneath the surface, she struggled to adapt to her new status. Damon, meanwhile, worked tirelessly, expanding his empire. He spent his days in high-stakes boardrooms and nights at exclusive soirees with entrepreneurs, movie stars and politicians. Early on, Elena joined him at these events, wearing designer gowns he purchased for her. Though she dazzled in these dresses, inside she felt like an imposter. She endured pointed stares from other socialites, such as Bianca Friedman, heiress to Friedman Associates, who always found a way to belittle Elena with backhanded compliments about her modest origins. At home, Damon often seemed affectionate but distant. He would praise Elena's charitable endeavors, claiming her kindness inspired him. Yet his phone buzzed constantly with texts and emails. Business deals demanded attention at all hours. On nights when Damon was away, Elena roamed the cavernous penthouse alone, her footsteps echoing on marble floors. She missed the laughter of her close-knit family, the warmth of her tiny childhood apartment. Confronted by her growing loneliness, Elena suggested they plan a simpler lifestyle or spend more time out of the public eye. Damon nodded absently, promising to schedule a quiet weekend getaway. But the weekend never came. Each time something urgent, an investor meeting, a conference in Tokyo, stole his attention. Gradually, a sense of disconnection seeped into their marriage. Damon's nights grew longer, his business trips more frequent. He would return with lavish gifts, a necklace from Tiffany's, a limited edition handbag, and a quick apology. Elena tried to accept these gestures, but deep down she yearned for conversation, shared laughter, and genuine intimacy. She tried to talk to him about starting a family, about building something beyond financial conquests. Damon deflected the topic, insisting it wasn't the right time. Rumors started circulating in hush-hush corners of Manhattan society, whispers that Damon was seen flirting at upscale clubs, spotted with an unfamiliar woman at a private lounge. Elena brushed them off as malicious lies. She had glimpsed Damon's capacity for kindness. She clung to the belief that he wouldn't betray her. Yet a nagging doubt lodged in her heart. In the swirl of glitz and glam, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that the foundation of their love story wasn't as solid as she had once believed. Cracks were forming, subtle but dangerous. She did her best to ignore them, trusting that Damon's love would prevail. Little did she know, the storms gathering around her would soon become impossible to ignore. The first time Elena saw an explicit sign of Damon's drifting loyalty was at a high-profile charity gala hosted by the Friedman Foundation. She had attended to support Damon's philanthropic commitments, even though she felt out of place among the city's wealthiest elites. Dressed in an elegant emerald gown, Elena tried to navigate the sea of privileged guests, looking for Damon, who had slipped away to speak with potential investors. A hush swept the crowd near one corner of the ballroom as a stunning woman in a glittering silver dress made her entrance. Tall, with cascading auburn hair, she radiated confidence. Whispers identified her as Bianca Friedman's friend, Sienna Tremont, a rising figure in the fashion world. Though Eleanor had heard Sienna's name in passing, she never expected the woman to carry such an aura of effortless seduction. Moments later, Eleanor spotted Damon across the room, engaged in a seemingly intimate discussion with Sienna. The pair stood close, and Damon's hand lingered on Sienna's arm in a way that felt too familiar. A wave of jealousy and confusion crashed over Elena. She tried to approach, but was intercepted by an elderly patron wanting to discuss the charity's cause. By the time she excused herself, Damon and Sienna had moved elsewhere. Throughout the evening, Eleanor caught glimpses of them, laughing together at the champagne bar, exchanging phone numbers in a subtle but telling motion. Her heart sank each time. She longed to confront Damon, but part of her feared causing a scene that tabloids would devour. She vowed to speak with him once they returned home. However, as typical of these events, Damon arrived back at the penthouse well past midnight. He claimed urgent business had kept him, avoiding her eyes when she inquired about Sienna. Days turned into weeks, and Elena's suspicions mounted. Late-night phone calls and unexplained outings became common. Damon's usual excuses. "It's a business dinner. We're brainstorming a collaboration with a fashion label," did little to soothe her anxieties. A swirl of discontent settled within Elena, but she remained hesitant to accuse Damon without undeniable proof. She remembered her humble roots, the vow to trust her husband. Could she really stand up to him in a confrontation? Meanwhile, Sienna Tremont's name started appearing in gossip columns as the new darling of Manhattan's fashion circles. Leaks suggested she was seeking investors for her brand, possibly involving Damon's wealth. Whenever Eleanor asked about these rumors, Damon brushed them off. "Sienna's just a contact. There's nothing personal," he insisted, though tension laced his voice. In private, Elena poured her turmoil into journaling, capturing each pang of fear, each flicker of heartbreak. She confided in no one, partly out of shame, partly because she feared people would label her the jealous, poor wife who couldn't handle the high society pressure. She attempted to hold on to faith that Damon wouldn't betray her so blatantly. Yet the seeds of doubt had been planted, and they grew daily under the shadow of temptation. Elena tried to remember the man who once knelt to help her pick up shattered glass at a fundraiser, who once spoke passionately about bridging social divides. Where had that Damon disappeared to? She feared that if she didn't act soon, she would lose the chance to save their fractured marriage before it slipped entirely into the shadows. The tension between Elena and Damon escalated until it erupted one rainy evening. Damon returned late from a supposed business dinner, reeking of perfume and carrying a faint lipstick mark on his shirt collar. Elena noticed immediately, her heart pounding in dread. She asked calmly about his evening. He gave a clipped response. "Meetings ran over, that's all." Unable to contain her alarm, Elena pressed further. "Why is there lipstick on your collar?" "Damon, I can smell the perfume. Please just tell me the truth." His face tightened. A flash of irritation crossed his features. "You're imagining things. Some colleague might have greeted me with a hug." "Stop making accusations." Elena trembled with anger and heartbreak. "I'm not blind, Damon. You're never home. You're evasive every time Sienna's name comes up. I can't ignore this anymore." He glared, shrugging off his suit jacket. "Sienna's just a potential business partner. I invest in new brands. That's my job. Don't twist it into something else." Their argument spiraled, voices echoing in the penthouse's marble corridors. Elena demanded honesty. Damon accused her of paranoia. She pleaded for him to recall the love that once bonded them. He scorned her lack of understanding about his obligations. Eleanor tried to keep her tears at bay, but they spilled over, fueled by frustration at his deflections. Eventually, Damon stalked off to the guest bedroom, slamming the door. Elena sank onto the living room couch, exhausted by the confrontation. She realized that her words had scarcely made a dent in his resolve to hide the truth. If he was cheating, he'd go to great lengths to deny it. If he wasn't, he offered no real comfort or reassurance. In the days that followed, Damon showered her with gifts. A diamond bracelet, an extravagant bouquet delivered with an apology note. Yet, the intangible distance remained. He never properly addressed her concerns. Each day, Eleanor felt more isolated, trapped in a marriage that had become a labyrinth of half-truths and cold silences. Desperate for an ally, she reached out to her close friend, Carmen Lopez, a fellow volunteer from the community center. Over coffee in a tiny cafe, Elena confessed her suspicions and heartbreak. Carmen listened intently, her brow creased with sympathy. "You have to protect yourself, Elena. If Damon is crossing lines, you need a plan. Don't let him reduce you to just a pawn in his world." Elena nodded, tears brimming. She admitted how lonely she felt in the penthouse, how uncertain she was about her future. Carmen urged her to gather evidence if she suspected an affair. "You deserve the truth," Carmen insisted gently, "and if he's lying, you deserve better." That night, Elena hovered near the bedroom window, staring out at Manhattan's glimmering skyline. The city lights once felt magical, symbolizing a grand new life. Now they seemed harsh and distant, mocking her naivety. She silently prayed for Damon to come clean, or to show her a shred of genuine love. But the penthouse halls echoed with emptiness long after midnight. A storm was brewing. Elena sensed it in every fiber. One more push, one more blatant betrayal, and everything might come crashing down. She wasn't sure if she had the strength to confront that reality. But events were in motion, and the tipping point was closer than she imagined. Elena's chance to confirm her worst fears arrived unexpectedly. One afternoon, while tidying Damon's home office, she discovered a slip of paper tucked between the pages of a business ledger. At first glance, it looked like an invoice, but upon closer inspection, it revealed a hotel reservation in Damon's name, 2 nights at an upscale boutique hotel in Midtown, with an arrival date just 1 week away. The occupant's name read Damon Blackwood +1, with a special request for a suite with a private hot tub. Her stomach clenched. Damon had not mentioned any upcoming trip, let alone an overnight stay in the same city where they lived. If it was a legitimate business transaction, why hide it in a random ledger? Elena's mind whirled. She took a photo of the reservation with her phone, her hands trembling. This was the closest thing she had to proof that Damon planned a rendezvous, quite possibly with Sienna Tremont. That evening, Eleanor confronted Damon with the slip of paper. He froze, then attempted to explain it away as a surprise getaway for them both. But his words lacked conviction. He didn't even try to feign excitement for a romantic weekend together. Elena demanded to see details. Did he book a spa treatment for them or dinner reservations? He stuttered, stumbling through half-baked justifications until finally snapping that he didn't need to defend his actions to her. Shaken, Elena retreated to her room, realizing that Damon's deceit was more brazen than she had feared. The next day, she confided in Carmen, who suggested that Eleanor see for herself who Damon planned to meet at that hotel. The notion of surveillance made Eleanor uneasy, but she felt cornered. If she was to salvage her dignity or gain the clarity needed to walk away, she had to be certain of Damon's betrayal. A plan took shape. On the day of the reservation, Eleanor told Damon she was volunteering at the community center all evening. Meanwhile, she dressed in inconspicuous clothes, a hat pulled low, and positioned herself in the hotel lobby a couple of hours before the check-in time. With her heart hammering against her ribcage, she waited, fighting the urge to flee. Carmen, always supportive, agreed to keep her phone line open in case Elena needed backup. Sure enough, as the clock neared 6, Damon arrived at the hotel's grand entrance. He stepped out of a sleek black car, scanning the surroundings. Then, from the opposite side, Sienna Tremont emerged, carrying a designer handbag and wearing a triumphant smile. They exchanged a brief kiss, witnessed only by a few bystanders who likely had no idea who they were. But Elena saw it all from behind a marble column, tears burning her eyes as every last illusion shattered. Sienna, with her model-like poise, linked her arm through Damon's as they strode toward the elevator. Elena captured photos on her phone, her hand trembling so violently she nearly dropped the device. She felt nauseated, outraged, humiliated, but a newfound resolve ignited within her as well. This was it. Damon had chosen to flaunt his affair openly, no longer bothering with vague denials. Elena left the hotel, her stomach in knots, wondering how she could ever face Damon again. One thing was certain: the life she had accepted, the illusions she had clung to, were gone. She could not simply confront him with accusations in private this time. He had made a deliberate choice to discard her trust, and the fury she felt now was matched only by the heartbreak pulsing deep within her. Eleanor spent a sleepless night in anguish, replaying the image of Damon and Sienna walking arm in arm into that hotel suite. Her tears dried into an implacable resolve by dawn. She realized she was done tolerating half-truths and false promises. If Damon wanted to destroy their marriage, he would not do it secretly. She would make him face the consequences. By midday, Eleanor forced herself to attend a scheduled volunteer shift at the community center, clinging to normalcy. The children's laughter offered a brief respite from the swirling storm of betrayal. But behind every smile she gave them, a fire burned. She phoned her father, Gabriel, seeking comfort. His gentle voice reminded her that she was strong, that she deserved more than scraps of affection. She didn't confide the full truth, only that she was going through a marital crisis. Gabriel sensed her pain, but did not press her for details, knowing she'd speak when ready. After her shift, she walked through the city aimlessly, letting her footsteps guide her. Hours later, she found herself outside Damon's penthouse building. The doorman greeted her politely, but she noticed his sympathetic expression. Word traveled quickly among staff. They likely suspected trouble in the marriage. Elena entered the elevator, heart pounding with adrenaline. Fate orchestrated a dramatic turn. As she stepped into the penthouse, she heard laughter echoing from the living room. Her stomach flipped in rage. Is he entertaining someone? She thought. Quietly, she removed her shoes, creeping forward until she saw them, Damon and Sienna, perched on the leather sofa, glasses of wine in hand. Time seemed to slow. Sienna wore a smug expression, her slender legs draped over the coffee table as if she owned the place. Damon, noticing Elena first, bolted upright, nearly spilling his wine. Sienna turned, an arched eyebrow rising when she spotted Elena. The tension crackled like electricity. "Elena," Damon stammered, "this isn't—" But Elena couldn't bear another lie. She locked eyes with Sienna, who merely sipped her wine, unashamed. White-hot fury coursed through Elena's veins. This woman had invaded her home, stolen her husband's time and loyalty, and for what? Money? Status? Sienna opened her mouth, perhaps to deliver a condescending remark, but Elena raised her hand, voice trembling with anger. "Don't! Just don't!" She turned to Damon, who stood frozen, panic evident in his eyes. "You brought her here?" Elena spat, her voice cracking. "Into the home we share? After everything?" Damon's face paled. He glanced helplessly from Sienna to Elena. "It's not what it looks like," he began feebly. Elena let out a short, bitter laugh. "Tell me, Damon, how am I supposed to interpret you entertaining your mistress in my living room?" She felt tears threaten to surface, but fury held them at bay. "I'm done with your lies." Sienna rose smoothly, setting her wineglass aside. She brushed off an imaginary speck of dust from her designer blouse. "Perhaps I should leave," she said, feigning politeness, but the glimmer in her eyes suggested victory. Elena stepped back, too disgusted to engage further. She turned on her heel and headed for the door. Damon rushed after her, calling her name, but she jerked away. "Don't touch me," she hissed, voice cracking from the depth of her hurt. Then she fled, leaving Damon standing there, face etched in guilt and panic. In that moment, Elena realized she could never erase the image of Sienna's triumphant smirk, nor forgive Damon for this ultimate betrayal. The penthouse door slammed shut, echoing the final chord in their grand facade of a marriage. She vowed never to let him see her crumble again. Her tears would be private, and her next move would be fueled by her own sense of worth. Eleanor stumbled onto the bustling Manhattan sidewalk, her vision blurred by tears she refused to shed in front of Damon and Sienna. Horns blared, neon signs flashed, but she felt disconnected from everything around her. Her mind replayed Damon's panicked face. Was that remorse, or simply fear of being caught? She needed to breathe. She needed refuge. Clutching her purse, she hailed a taxi and directed the driver to Carmen's apartment in a working-class neighborhood near Elmhurst. Her heart pounded throughout the entire ride, her fury morphing into heartbreak. By the time the taxi reached Carmen's place, Elena was trembling. Carmen welcomed her with open arms, quickly ushering her inside to the small living room. "What happened?" she asked, her dark eyes flashing concern. Elena's composure cracked. She recounted how she walked in on Damon hosting Sienna in her own home. The recounting felt surreal, like describing a scene from a melodramatic soap opera. Carmen's face hardened with protective anger. She rubbed Elena's shoulders, offering tissues and warm tea. Finally, when Elena's shaking subsided, Carmen said calmly, "You can stay here as long as you need. We'll figure this out together." Days blurred into a haze of sorrow. Elena refused to answer Damon's calls or texts, ignoring each frantic attempt at apology. He left voicemail after voicemail, claiming it was a misunderstanding, that Sienna dropped by uninvited and nothing had happened. Elena barely had the energy to scoff at these excuses. Sienna's presence, the intimacy of the setting, she wasn't a random visitor. Meanwhile, tabloids picked up hints of a scandal. Paparazzi noticed Elena missing from Damon's arm at a major charity event. Columnists speculated about marital discord. She dreaded the inevitability of her heartbreak becoming gossip fodder. But some shred of dignity remained. She hadn't publicly acknowledged Damon's infidelity yet, and part of her debated whether she should. The thought of their private agony becoming citywide entertainment sickened her. Amid the turmoil, Elena's father called repeatedly, worried by her abrupt disappearance from the penthouse. She struggled to maintain a brave front, explaining only that she needed some space. Gabriel sensed his daughter was in deep pain, but understood her reluctance to voice the entire truth over the phone. "Come home if you need to," he said, voice filled with paternal warmth. "We're always here for you." Late one night, Elena sat at Carmen's modest kitchen table, rummaging through the memories of her life with Damon. Photos from the early days, smiling shots on romantic getaways, images of them dancing at galas, lay scattered across her phone. She knew that behind the glamorous veneer, their relationship had rotted from within. Perhaps she had tried too hard to bridge their worlds, ignoring the cracks that formed from greed and ambition. Carmen encouraged her to seek legal advice, reminding Elena that she wasn't just dealing with heartbreak, but also entangled finances. Elena, however, felt overwhelmed. She wasn't ready to talk to lawyers, to brandish lawsuits or public scandal. Part of her still clung to the faint hope that Damon might see reason, might remember the love that once united them. But with each passing hour, that hope dimmed. The only clear truth she had now was that her old life was over. The penthouse, the high society illusions, the unconditional trust, gone. In the vacuum left behind, a seed of determination sprouted. She would not be a silent victim in this story. Whether Damon tried to salvage their marriage or not, she needed to reclaim her own identity. Because if she waited for him to define her worth, she would be forever lost in the shadows of his betrayal. While Elena found sanctuary with Carmen, Damon Blackwood faced a maelstrom of guilt and fear within the penthouse's hollow walls. Sienna Tremont had left soon after Elena's dramatic departure, casually remarking that she wasn't here for drama. As the door shut behind her, Damon felt an immediate wave of regret. He collapsed onto the sofa, burying his head in his hands. His phone calls to Elena went unanswered. Texts apologizing, offering to talk, went unread. He discovered her clothing gone, personal items missing. It dawned on him that this time Eleanor wouldn't be easily pacified by lavish gifts or shallow excuses. The entire situation was a pit he'd dug for himself, lured by Sienna's allure and the twisted excitement of conquest. In an attempt to reclaim control, Damon phoned his longtime friend and lawyer, Christian Friedman, a cousin to Bianca Friedman and a discreet confidant. Over a tense dinner at a private club, Damon poured out the situation. He sought legal advice on protecting his assets if Elena filed for divorce. Christian raised a brow. "You should be more worried about repairing your marriage, Damon." "Elena has every right to be furious." Damon slammed a fist on the table, sending cutlery rattling. "I know, but I can't lose everything. She might come after me for half my fortune." Christian shook his head, disappointment etched on his features. "Don't reduce her to a gold digger. Elena's not like that. You messed up. You might want to approach this with humility." For the first time, Damon realized he risked losing more than money. The image of Elena's tear-filled eyes haunted him. He recalled how she once lit up whenever he entered a room, how her laughter resonated through the penthouse when they shared quiet nights. He had believed his wealth and status shielded him from consequences, but now he stood on the brink of losing the one person who had loved him sincerely. In desperation, Damon made a grand gesture, showing up at the community center where Elena volunteered. He tried to corner her after a children's event, but Carmen barred his way. "She doesn't want to see you," Carmen hissed, eyes blazing. "Stay away until you learn respect." Damon left, humiliated and strangely bereft. He wandered Manhattan, drifting through the same streets Elena once took him on to meet her old friends. He visited a small diner where they had shared late-night pancakes in the early days of dating, only to find everything overshadowed by memories of her warmth. Returning to the penthouse that night, Damon found it emptier than ever. The room still smelled faintly of Elena's floral perfume, a silent reminder of her presence that now mocked his isolation. Sienna tried calling, but Damon couldn't bear to talk to the woman who symbolized his betrayal. He let her calls go to voicemail. Alone in the darkness, Damon felt a pang of regret so sharp it almost suffocated him. He had always prided himself on being a master deal-maker, skillfully maneuvering through business and social circles. But in matters of the heart, he realized he was a fool, undone by vanity and impulse. Now, unless he found a way to atone, Elena might slip away forever, and for the first time, the billionaire who once seemed invincible tasted the bitterness of helplessness. Elena's father, Gabriel Martin, arrived in the city unannounced one afternoon. He knocked gently on Carmen's apartment door. Elena opened it, shocked to see him standing there in his worn flannel shirt, lines of worry etched deeply across his brow. She threw her arms around him, fresh tears welling up as she breathed in the comforting scent of home. Gabriel held her close, murmuring that he'd come because he sensed how badly she needed him. Over cups of chamomile tea in Carmen's cozy kitchen, Elena finally shared the full story. Damon's blatant affair, the heartbreak of discovering him with Sienna, the humiliating confrontation in her own living room. Gabriel listened quietly, his gentle gaze never leaving his daughter's face. Though rage flickered in his eyes at what Damon had done, he remained a steady pillar, focusing on supporting Elena rather than venting anger. Gabriel suggested they drive upstate for a few days, away from the city's noise and tabloids. Carmen seconded the idea, offering to keep Elena's belongings safe if she needed a break. Elena hesitated, unsure if running away would solve anything. But the weight of the city pressed down on her. In a moment of weakness, she agreed, craving the peace of simpler surroundings. They headed to a small lakeside cabin a family friend had lent them, nestled in the quiet hush of pine trees. For the first time in weeks, Elena slept without nightmares. Each morning she strolled by the water, letting the stillness ease her heart. Gabriel accompanied her, occasionally sharing stories from her childhood, an attempt to remind her of her resilience. She found comfort in his unwavering love, though her mind still churned with unresolved questions about her marriage. Midweek, Carmen called, updating Elena about Damon's repeated attempts to contact her. He'd even shown up at the community center again, bearing a donation check and requesting a conversation. Carmen refused to give him Elena's whereabouts. She told Elena that Damon's eyes were haunted, that he seemed truly remorseful. "It's your call," Carmen reminded, "but if you want closure, eventually you'll have to face him." Elena appreciated Carmen's honesty. She realized she couldn't hide in the woods forever. If she was to decide her future, be it divorce or an attempt at reconciliation, she had to speak to Damon. Yet the prospect filled her with dread. She still loved the man she once believed him to be, but that man had seemingly evaporated. In his place stood someone who had shattered her heart. Before returning to Manhattan, Eleanor confided in Gabriel that she was torn about whether to give Damon another chance. Her father sighed, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Only you know if there's enough trust left to rebuild. But never forget your worth, Mihija. You can stand on your own 2 feet. You don't need his money or his pity." His words resonated deeply. Elena resolved that if she confronted Damon, it would be on her terms, with no illusions about wealth or status. She would not be reduced to the poor wife, who had to grovel for acceptance. Instead, she would decide if he was worthy of stepping back into her life at all. A fierce clarity ignited within her, one that promised the next step in this drama would be hers to dictate. Elena returned to Carmen's apartment after her brief respite upstate. A calm resolve anchored her steps as she set her suitcase by the living room couch. She discovered a letter waiting for her, a formal envelope with Damon's company seal. Inside, in careful handwriting, Damon wrote that he'd appreciate one final opportunity to speak in person, away from cameras or meddling onlookers. "I owe you every apology and explanation," he concluded. "If you can find it in your heart, please meet me at the old diner where we used to share pancakes. 7 p.m. "Any evening you choose." Carmen, reading over her shoulder, nodded. "He's definitely persistent." Elena exhaled, her heart fluttering with anxiety. "I have questions he must answer once and for all." That evening, Elena selected a plain outfit, a simple white blouse, dark jeans and flats. No more glamorous dresses or illusions. She took a taxi to the small diner in her old neighborhood, the place where they once discovered common ground over midnight breakfasts. Her stomach roiled with nerves as she pushed open the creaky door, the familiar aroma of coffee and frying bacon washing over her. At a corner booth, Damon sat waiting. He wore a simple collared shirt, his usual arrogance replaced by a subdued tension. He rose immediately when he saw Elena, desperation flickering in his eyes. "Thank you for coming," he murmured. She slid into the booth, arms folded, avoiding direct eye contact. A waitress approached, and Elena asked for a coffee. "Black?" Damon ordered the same, then cleared his throat. I don't know where to start." Eleanor broke the silence, her voice quiet but firm. "Why did you do it, Damon? We were married. I trusted you. You humiliated me. And you did it in our home." Her words trembled, but her gaze was unwavering. He leaned forward, hands clasped. "Because I'm a coward," he said, voice cracking. "I got sucked into Sienna's world of flattery and excitement. I told myself it was harmless, a way to escape the pressures of my business. But it was never harmless. I see that now." Swallowing hard, he continued, "The wealth, the attention, it went to my head. I started thinking I could have whatever I wanted without consequence, but when I saw your face that day, I realized what I'd done. I betrayed the one person who loved me beyond my status." Elena's eyes stung. "Do you love her?" she asked bluntly, bracing herself. "Is that why you risked our marriage?" Damon shook his head vehemently. "No, it was lust, vanity, the thrill of something new, but I don't love her. Honestly, I don't think I even like her. She reminded me of a life where no one questions me, a fleeting excitement." He closed his eyes, exhaling a shaky breath. "I know sorry isn't enough, Elena, but I am sorry beyond words." A bitter smile tugged at her lips. "You expect me to believe a few regrets fix everything. My life has been torn apart." She stared at him, searching for sincerity. "What if I choose to leave you? Are you prepared for that?" He bowed his head. "If that's what you want, I won't fight you. But please, give me a chance to prove I'm not irredeemable. Let me at least help you, support your charities, show you I can be a better man." Elena sipped her coffee, silent for a long minute. The old diner bustled around them, orders shouted, utensils clanking. It felt surreal, this intimate confrontation in such an ordinary setting. Finally, she spoke. "I'm not making any promises. If you want to show me you've changed, you'll have to do it with actions. Don't contact me until you've started therapy or found a way to step back from your toxic lifestyle. If I see real effort, maybe we'll talk again." Damon nodded, tears brimming in his eyes. "I understand." As she stood to leave, he reached for her hand, but stopped, uncertain. Elena turned and walked out the door, the diner lights reflecting on her unshed tears. She felt a small sense of relief at laying bare her demands, and sorrow that it had come to this. The path ahead was far from certain, but at least she was no longer voiceless in her own story. In the following weeks, Damon surprised Eleanor by actually following through on her conditions. Through mutual acquaintances, she heard he had begun seeing a therapist specializing in marital issues and personal growth. He also delegated more responsibilities at Blackwood Enterprises, telling his board he needed time to refocus. Subtle shifts in the tabloid headlines reflected these changes. Damon, once a fixture at exclusive clubs, now absent from paparazzi snapshots of midnight parties. Elena, observing from afar, felt a swirl of complicated emotions. On one hand, relief that Damon seemed genuine about self-improvement. On the other, lingering resentment that it took a catastrophic betrayal for him to realize the emptiness of his pursuits. She occasionally thought of Sienna Tremont, now parading through fashion events. Gossip columns linked Sienna to other influential men, hardly hinting at Damon anymore. The city had moved on from their scandal, but Elena's heart still bore the scars. Carmen and Gabriel provided unwavering support. Carmen applauded Elena's boundary setting, encouraging her to continue focusing on her own personal growth. Elena decided to reapply for a master's program in social work, hoping to turn her volunteer passion into a career. Freed from the demands of high society appearances, she poured her energies into studying, brushing up on old academic references, and forging new professional connections. Occasionally, Damon sent carefully worded letters describing his therapy progress. He admitted to confronting childhood issues, pressures from his family legacy, an internal fear of vulnerability. He confided that wealth had always been his shield, a means to ensure no one could reject him. Ironically, it had led him to sabotage genuine intimacy with Elena. At times, she found herself moved by his confessions, albeit uncertain if such revelations could truly heal the damage. One crisp autumn day, Eleanor agreed to meet Damon at a philanthropic event for a youth arts initiative in Brooklyn. She arrived early, wearing a simple outfit, hair pulled back in a low ponytail. Damon showed up soon after, looking different. No entourage, no designer flash, just a plain sweater and a quiet, respectful demeanor. His eyes lit with cautious hope when he saw her. They toured the event together, conversing with local artists, smiling at teenagers excitedly sharing their artwork. Damon donated a significant sum to the program, but did so without the usual fanfare or media presence. Elena noticed genuine engagement in his questions to the young participants. He seemed enthralled by their passion, praising their creativity. She watched from a short distance, torn between admiration and the memory of heartbreak. Afterward, they took a short walk through a nearby park. The hush of fallen leaves underfoot served as their soundtrack. Elena asked about Damon's therapy, how it felt to confront long-buried issues. His answers were thoughtful, no glib deflections. He offered no excuses for his affair, admitting it was entirely his failing. "All I can do is keep working to be better," he said softly, eyes on the horizon. A small part of Elena's heart, the part that once adored him, stirred. She recognized progress, yet the wound was still fresh enough that she held back. "Let's just keep it like this for a while," she murmured. "No big promises, no forcing a reunion. Let me watch you grow and we'll see." Damon nodded, relief mingling with acceptance. Their conversation ended with a gentle goodbye. For the first time, Eleanor left with a glimmer of cautious optimism. Maybe, just maybe, Damon wasn't beyond redemption. But she also knew she had found herself in this process, her dignity, her ambitions, and she refused to lose them again in the name of love. Weeks melted into months. Damon's transformation continued in tangible ways. He publicly announced a new scholarship fund aimed at helping youth from underprivileged backgrounds, an initiative reminiscent of Elena's core values. He quietly withdrew from high society clubs, focusing instead on smaller philanthropic gatherings and genuine corporate restructuring. Gossip columns, once swirling with scandal, moved on to fresh targets. Damon's name began to surface with respect for his philanthropic pivot rather than personal drama. Meanwhile, Eleanor thrived on her own path. She began attending evening classes for her master's in social work, forging friendships with like-minded peers. She balanced her time between Carmen's place and occasional stays with her father. She felt an exhilarating sense of independence, no longer living in Damon's shadow, no longer reliant on his resources. Through her volunteer work, she connected with families whose stories resonated deeply. She discovered a newfound purpose that went beyond being just Mrs. Blackwood. Yet the question of her marriage loomed. Legally, they remained wed. Emotionally, they were in a suspended state. Damon's repeated apologies and consistent humility began chipping away at her protective walls. She saw that he was no longer the arrogant billionaire who believed he could get away with anything. Therapists often mention the concept of earning back trust through consistent actions over time, and Damon seemed to live by it daily, never pushing Elena for forgiveness, only demonstrating sincerity in every interaction. On a chilly evening, they met for dinner at a quaint bistro near the community center. Over candlelight, Damon recounted a small success. He'd convinced a few wealthy associates to co-fund an art program for youth. Elena congratulated him. The conversation felt light, almost reminiscent of their early courting days, but with a sobering undercurrent. They both knew the illusions of the past wouldn't suffice. As dessert arrived, Damon carefully reached across the table, gently taking Elena's hand. She let him, though her heartbeat quickened. In a soft tone, he said, "I know we can't just pick up where we left off, but I want you to know, I see you now, truly see you. The good we once shared, I believe it's still there if we nurture it. I'm prepared to do whatever it takes." Elena inhaled, tears glinting. "If we were to try again," she murmured, "it would mean starting over completely. No lies, no mistress in the shadows, and I will never give up my independence again. Do you understand?" He nodded, earnest. "I do. I want a partner, not a decoration. I was a fool to treat you otherwise." They finished dinner in a swirl of tentative hope. That night, Eleanor lay awake, grappling with her decision. She prayed for clarity, recalling how Damon had shattered her heart, but also how he was striving to piece his broken self back together. By dawn, she felt a certain peace settle. Life rarely offers easy paths or neat resolutions. Perhaps her heartbreak had forged a stronger version of herself, one who could choose to walk away or to rebuild, either way, holding her head high. Armed with this internal certainty, Elena resolved to see if their love, born once in naive optimism, could be reborn in truth. Whether it succeeded or failed, she would never again be the powerless woman overshadowed by Damon's wealth. She was Elena Martin Blackwood, a woman who discovered her own worth, and that knowledge would guide her next steps without fear. Spring arrived in Manhattan, bringing mild breezes and renewed vitality to the city. The time felt ripe for fresh beginnings. After months of cautious interactions, Eleanor and Damon reached a crossroads. The question of living arrangements loomed large. Carmen nudged Elena gently, saying her friend needed to decide whether to stand by the vow of marriage or finalize a separation. Damon, for his part, stepped back, letting Elena take the lead. He refused to pressure her, something that spoke volumes about how much he'd changed. Elena visited the penthouse one last time before making her choice. She walked through the grand foyer, her steps echoing against the marble floors. Dust motes swirled in the sunlight, but she no longer felt awe or intimidation. Instead, she recalled the night she found Damon with Sienna in the living room, the pain that twisted her soul. She also remembered the earlier times, gentle mornings, sipping coffee together, celebrating a charitable success, or quietly dancing to jazz in the half-lit lounge. The penthouse held memories of both wonder and sorrow. She realized that if she returned, it would have to be on her own terms. Damon awaited her on the balcony, overlooking the Manhattan skyline. He'd arranged a small table with a bouquet of her favorite flowers, white lilies. When she arrived, he smiled tentatively, gesturing for her to sit. The hush between them was thick with anticipation. "I wanted to show you something," he said softly, sliding a small folder across the table. Inside, Elena found documents outlining a trust fund in her name, designed to support any philanthropic initiatives she saw fit. "I don't want you to worry that reconciling means losing your independence," Damon explained. "This fund is yours to administer for your community work or personal goals. No strings attached." She blinked back tears. His gesture felt like an apology for using money as leverage in the past. She recognized it as a thoughtful step, though she knew trust would take more than financial generosity. She set the folder aside, meeting his gaze. "This is kind of you, but what I need to know is if you can truly honor my boundaries, my freedom. If we try again, I won't be the docile wife overshadowed by your empire." He nodded earnestly, tears shining. "Elena, I want a real partnership. I've learned that without love and respect, money is meaningless. I'm ready to do whatever it takes to rebuild what I broke." She reached for his hand, trembling slightly. For a moment she closed her eyes, recalling her father's advice, Carmen's unwavering support, the heartbreak of betrayal. Then, with a slow exhale, she said, "All right. We'll try to rebuild, but at a pace that respects my needs. We'll continue therapy, maintain separate finances if that's what keeps me secure. One misstep, Damon, just one, and I'm gone." Emotion choked his voice as he whispered, "I understand. Thank you for giving me this chance." They stood, stepping back into the penthouse that once symbolized their union. Now it felt like a blank slate awaiting a new narrative. Damon opened the large sliding doors, letting the spring air flood the living space. Elena stepped forward, noticing how the breeze carried the scent of fresh blossoms from a nearby park. The city spread out before them, both harsh and beautiful, a fitting metaphor for their marriage. Fragile, but perhaps still capable of blooming again if nourished with honesty, respect, and the humility Damon had finally embraced. Sometimes, the greatest heartbreak ignites the fiercest transformation. Elena Martin Blackwood discovered that beneath the glitter of a luxurious life lay the raw truth of betrayal. No material comfort could soothe her wounds when Damon introduced another woman into their sacred home. Yet, rather than surrender, Elena forged her own path, stepping away from wealth's empty promises and demanding the respect and honesty she deserved. Damon, jolted awake by the threat of losing her forever, confronted his deepest flaws and fought to rebuild what he had destroyed. If you found yourself captivated by this tale of heartbreak, resilience, and a love forced to confront its own darkness, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us craft more stories that delve into the fragile yet powerful bonds between people, reminding us that even in moments of fury and desperation, hope can emerge. Thank you for reading, and remember, true worth is never measured by wealth, but by the depth of one's heart.
In the glittering world of Manhattan's elite, Marcus Thorne was a king, and his annual company gala was his coronation. This year, he stood with his mistress Isabella on his arm, ready to claim the ultimate prize. His wife Amelia was supposed to be at home, a forgotten, simple woman he'd deemed unworthy of his new life. But he made one fatal mistake. He underestimated the woman he betrayed. While the mistress took the stage to claim their shared victory, the ballroom doors swung open, revealing a wife no one recognized, and a truth that would bring an empire to its knees. The silence in their Upper East Side penthouse was a specific kind of quiet. It wasn't peaceful. It was hollow, the sound of space that had once been filled with laughter and conversation. Emilia Thorne stood at the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the river of headlights on Fifth Avenue, but her gaze was unfocused. The city lights, once a shared dream, now felt like a million glittering eyes watching her loneliness. Her husband, Marcus Thorne, was a man forged in the crucible of ambition. When she'd met him, he was a brilliant junior analyst with a charmingly crooked smile and dreams that seemed to light up the world around him. Emilia, with her quiet intelligence and unwavering belief in him, had been his anchor. She'd proofread his reports, talked him through nerve-wracking presentations, and celebrated every small victory as if it were her own. She had put her own promising career in corporate law on hold to be the foundation upon which he built his empire. Now he was Marcus Thorne, Executive Vice President of Thorne Industries, the sprawling conglomerate his father, Alistair Thorne, had built from the ground up. The crooked smile had been straightened by expensive orthodontics, and his dreams were no longer shared over takeout on their tiny apartment floor. They were announced in boardrooms and whispered about in the pages of the Wall Street Journal, and in the process the man she loved had become a stranger, replaced by a polished, impeccably tailored effigy who moved through their shared life with the detached efficiency of a CEO managing an underperforming asset. The Thorne Industries annual gala was less than a week away. It was the social and corporate event of the season, a night where fortunes were made and careers were cemented under the grand chandeliers of the Plaza Hotel. For years, Emilia had attended on Marcus's arm, a quiet but proud partner. But this year was different. "You're not seriously thinking of going, are you?" Marcus had asked 2 nights ago, not even looking up from his tablet. He was scrolling through market projections, his brow furrowed in concentration. The question was casual, but the dismissal in his tone was a physical blow. Emilia had been arranging flowers in a vase, a small act of defiance against the sterile modernity of their home. Her hands stilled. "Of course I am. It's the gala, Marcus. I've already been in touch with a stylist." He finally looked up, and his eyes, once warm and full of adoration, were coolly analytical. He scanned her simple linen dress and bare face as if she were a line item he was about to cut from a budget. "Emilia, listen. This year is critical. Dad is about to announce the new global VP position. It's between me and Isabella Ricci. The entire board will be there, international investors. It's not a social call. It's the final round of the longest job interview of my life. And I've been by your side for every other round," she replied, her voice softer than she intended. "Why would this be any different?" "Because," he said, sighing with a theatrical impatience that was becoming his default mode. "You don't fit. Not anymore. The wives of the other executives, they play the game. They run charities, they sit on boards, they know how to network. You're wonderful, honey, but your world is here." He gestured vaguely around the silent, opulent apartment. "You wouldn't be comfortable. And frankly, your presence would be a distraction I can't afford." A distraction. That's what she had become. The anchor was now a dead weight. Each word was a carefully chosen dart designed to wound her confidence until she retreated willingly. He was telling her she was not enough, but wrapping it in the language of concern. The name Isabella Ricci hung in the air between them. Isabella was the company's brilliant, beautiful, and utterly ruthless chief of mergers and acquisitions. She was everything Emilia was not, sharp-edged, dressed in Tom Ford, and armed with a smile that could close a billion-dollar deal or cut a rival to shreds. Emilia had seen the way Marcus looked at Isabella in company photos. A spark of shared, ravenous ambition she hadn't seen in his eyes for years. not since he had looked at her that way. "I see," Amelia said, turning back to her flowers, her posture rigid. "So you'll be going alone. It's better this way." For us, he'd said the lie smooth and practiced. He'd already stood up and walked to the bar to pour himself a scotch, the conversation for him already over. Now standing by the window, his words echoed in the empty space. It wasn't just about the gala. It was about the late nights that were no longer explained the scent of a perfume, something expensive and floral like Chanel No. 5 that clung to his suit jackets, and the second phone he thought she didn't know about. It was about the emotional chasm that had opened between them, a vast, silent canyon she could no longer pretend wasn't there. Her phone buzzed on the marble countertop. It was a message from her best friend, Julian Croft, a fiercely talented but still struggling fashion designer. "Did you decide on a concept for the gala dress yet? I have a sketch for that emerald silk we talked about that will make every jaw in the room hit the floor. Call me." Amelia's fingers trembled as she typed a reply. "Change of plans, I'm not going this year." Julian's reply was instantaneous. "What, call me? Now." She ignored the call. She couldn't bring herself to voice the humiliation to say the words out loud. "My husband is ashamed of me. He thinks I'm a liability. Admitting it would make it irrevocably real." Later that evening, Marcus came home humming a tune she didn't recognize. He seemed lighter, energized. He dropped his briefcase by the door and loosened his tie. "Big day," he announced to the room at large. "Isabella and I finally broke through on the Petrocorp merger. It's the deal of the decade. If we land this, the VP position is all but guaranteed." He didn't specify who the "we" referred to. "That's wonderful, Marcus." Amelia said, her voice a perfect imitation of the supportive wife she was supposed to be. He walked over and kissed her on the forehead, a gesture so devoid of passion it felt like a corporate formality. "See, this is what I'm talking about. The pressure is immense. The gala is the final presentation stage. Alistair wants Isabella and me to say a few words about the merger. It's our victory lap. There it was again. The new us." He disappeared into their bedroom to change, leaving his briefcase on the floor. For a moment, Amelia just stared at it. It was a sleek leather vessel of his new life, a life from which she was being systematically excluded. A dark, unfamiliar impulse rose within her. For 10 years she had respected his privacy, his space, his work. She was his trusted partner, but she wasn't that anymore. She was an outsider. With her heart hammering against her ribs, she knelt and clicked open the latches. The interior was organized with his signature precision folders, a laptop, a tablet. But nestled in a side pocket, tucked into a velvet pouch, was a small square box. It was a shade of deep red, so iconic it was instantly recognizable. Cartier. Her breath hitched. Was it for her a peace offering? An apology for his cruelty about the gala? Hope, fragile and foolish, fluttered in her chest. She lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of black velvet, was a necklace. It wasn't a delicate chain or a simple pendant. It was a statement piece, a river of brilliant cut diamonds cascading from a central, impossibly large sapphire that glittered under the dim light like a shard of the midnight sky. It was breathtakingly beautiful, and it was not her. Amelia's style was classic, understated. This was a warrior's jewel, a trophy to be worn by someone who commanded attention, who walked into a room and owned it. It was a necklace for a woman like Isabella Ricci. The hope in her chest died, replaced by an icy certainty that froze her from the Samuturute. This was Isabella's reward for the Petrocorp deal. This was the jewel that would adorn the neck of the woman who stood by her husband's side at the gala, the woman who had taken her place. She gently closed the box, placed it back in the velvet pouch, and secured it in the briefcase, her movements steady and precise. She clicked the latches shut. When she stood up, the reflection that looked back at her from the dark window was not of a heartbroken wife. The tears she expected were not there. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, but within them a new light was beginning to dawn. It was the cold, hard glint of resolve. Marcus had called her a distraction. He had deemed her unworthy. He had tried to lock her away in their gilded cage. But he had forgotten one crucial detail. It was Emilia who had taught him how to read a balance sheet. It was Emilia who had stayed up with him for nights on end, helping him research the arcane legal precedents that won him his first major case for the company. He had discarded her, but he had forgotten to take back the knowledge and the strength she had given him. The gala was in 5 days. He thought he had barred the door. He had no idea she was about to build her own. The days leading up to the gala became a masterclass in deception, a silent, brutal war waged within the pristine walls of their apartment. Emilia became an actress, and her performance was flawless. She played the part of the chastened, compliant wife. She agreed that Marcus was right, that the gala was too much pressure, and that she would be much happier at home with a book. She made his favorite meals, asked about his day with a convincing smile, and wished him luck on the final push for the Petrocorp merger. Her compliance seemed to relieve him. He became more relaxed around her, almost magnanimous in his victory. He no longer saw her as a problem to be managed, but as a settled issue, a box that had been ticked. This carelessness was his second mistake. It allowed her the space she needed to uncover the full architecture of his betrayal. The gaslighting had been happening for months, a slow, insidious erosion of her reality. Every suspicion she'd voiced had been turned back on her. Another late night, Marcus Emilia, the deal is at a critical stage. You know that. Why are you trying to make me feel guilty for working hard for us? Who is Isabella, who keeps texting you after 10 p.m.? She's my colleague. We're leading the biggest project of our careers. Do you want me to fail? Your insecurity is becoming a real problem. This shirt smells like perfume. I was in meetings all day. People wear perfume. My God, you're becoming paranoid. Maybe you should talk to someone. He had made her believe that the problem was her, not his behavior. He had painted her as jealous, unstable, and irrational until she had started to question her own sanity. But the sight of that Cartier necklace had been like a lightning strike, illuminating the entire twisted landscape of his lies. Now she saw his tactics for what they were, not a defense, but a deliberate, cruel strategy. Her investigation began with the shared family tablet she hadn't touched in months. He used it for personal browsing, assuming she never looked at it. His search history was a digital diary of his affair. Reservations for 2 at Daniel, a restaurant he'd always claimed was impossible to get into. Hotel bookings at the Carlyle for nights he was supposedly on a red-eye to Chicago. Receipts from luxury boutiques on Madison Avenue for gifts she had never received. And then there were the photos. Tucked away in a hidden folder in his cloud storage was a collection of pictures of him and Isabella. They were in Paris, a trip he'd claimed was a solo corporate retreat, smiling under the Eiffel Tower. They were on a yacht, the sun glinting off the water, Isabella in a bikini draped over him. In every photo he wore the same expression, the unguarded, joyful smile she hadn't seen directed at her in years. He looked like the man she had fallen in love with, and seeing that man with another woman was a fresh, searing pain that eclipsed everything else. She scrolled through the images, her breath catching in her throat, a wave of nausea washing over her. This wasn't a recent fling. This was a life. A whole parallel life he had been living behind her back. For how long? A year. 2. She thought back, recontextualizing every late night, every business trip, every moment of manufactured anger. The scale of the deception was staggering. The final piece clicked into place when she found the emails. Using a password she had helped him create years ago, the name of their first dog, she accessed his personal account. There, in a neatly organized folder labeled Project Nightingale, was his correspondence with Isabella. It wasn't just romantic, it was a business plan. They weren't just lovers, they were conspirators. They discussed the Petrocorp merger in detail, but they also discussed Alistair Thorne's impending retirement and their strategy for ousting other senior executives. Their plan was to secure the global VP position for Marcus, with Isabella as his second-in-command, effectively giving them total control over the company's future. But one email sent by Isabella to Marcus just 3 weeks ago made Amelia's blood run cold. Subject: The E problem. Marcus: We need to discuss the Amelia situation. Your father is a traditionalist. He values family and loyalty above all. A messy divorce on the eve of the announcement could be catastrophic. It would make you look unstable. He might pass you over. You need to keep her managed and out of sight until after the gala. Once you're named VP, your position will be unassailable. We can handle the fallout then. Give her whatever she wants to go away quietly. But until that promotion is signed, she is your biggest liability. A liability. The same word he had used. It hadn't even been his own. It had been Isabella's. He was a puppet, and Isabella was pulling the strings. The humiliation, the patronizing dismissal. It was all part of a calculated strategy to manage her. Amelia closed the laptop, a terrifying calm settling over her. The grief was still there, a hot, aching core in the center of her chest, but it was now encased in something harder, colder. Rage. Not a hot, screaming rage, but a glacial, focused fury. They thought she was a problem to be managed, a simple domestic creature who could be placated and then discarded. They had analyzed her as a business risk, a variable to be controlled. They had fundamentally misunderstood who she was. She stood up and walked to her closet. Pushing past the rows of tasteful beige and navy blue outfits that Marcus approved of, she reached into the very back. There in a garment bag was the person she used to be. She pulled out a tailored pantsuit, the fabric still crisp. It was from her time at the law firm, a life she had packed away. She had been good at her job. Sharp, analytical, and relentless. Marcus had loved that about her, before he decided he needed a wife who was a soft cushion rather than a whetstone. He had told her she wouldn't fit in at the gala. He was right. The old Amelia wouldn't. The quiet, supportive wife would have been swallowed whole by the sharks in that ballroom. But she had no intention of going as the old Amelia. She picked up her phone and dialed Julian's number. He answered on the first ring. Finally, I was about to send a search party. What is this nonsense about you not going to the gala? Amelia took a deep breath. I am going, Julian, she said, her voice steady and clear. But I need more than a dress. I need armor. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Julian, who knew her better than anyone, could hear the change in her voice. The tremor of hurt was gone, replaced by steel. "Armor," he repeated slowly, a grin evident in his tone. "My darling Emilia, what kind of war are we starting?" "The kind you win," she replied. "And I need to look like a queen, taking back her throne." Julian Croft's studio in the meat-packing district was a chaotic wonderland of fabrics, sketches, and half-finished creations. It was Emilia's sanctuary, a world away from the cold, minimalist perfection of her penthouse. The moment she stepped inside, the scent of silk and hot tea enveloped her, and Julian was there, pulling her into a fierce hug. "All right," he said, stepping back and holding her at arm's length, his sharp eyes taking in the dark circles under hers. "Spill it, from the top, and don't leave out a single sordid detail." And so she did. With a cup of steaming jasmine tea warming her hands, she laid out the entire story. The lies, the gaslighting, the other woman, the secret life, and the cold, calculated plan to discard her. She told him about the Cartier necklace and Isabella's email labeling her the E problem. As she spoke, the story transformed from a source of shame into a case file, a set of facts to be analyzed and acted upon. Julian listened without interruption, his expression shifting from sympathy to righteous fury. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment, sketching idly on a notepad. So he finally said, his pencil moving with sharp, angry strokes. "The plan is not to show up and make a scene. It's not to cry or throw a drink. It's to walk into that room and remind every single person there, especially him and his paramour, of exactly who you are." "More than that," Emilia corrected him gently. "I'm going to show them who I've become." Julian's eyes lit up. "Yes, this is what I'm talking about. Forget the emerald silk. That was for the wife. We need something for the queen. Something that doesn't whisper. Something that roars." For the next 3 days, Julian's studio became their war room. He draped fabrics over her, his hands flying as he pinned and cut. They decided on a color of red so deep it was almost black in the shadows, but that burned like liquid fire in the light. It was the color of blood and wine, the color of vengeance. The design was deceptively simple, a column of silk that clung to her body, with a structured, almost architectural neckline that framed her face and a daringly low back. It was elegant, severe, and utterly commanding. "This dress isn't for a man's approval," Julian declared as he worked. "This dress is a declaration of independence." While Julian forged her physical armor, Emilia began to work on her own strategy. She knew that simply looking powerful wasn't enough. She needed leverage. She needed a weapon. And she knew exactly where to find it. Her mind went back to the Petrocorp merger. Marcus had called it the deal of the decade. He and Isabella had been working on it for over a year. She remembered the early days when Marcus was still sharing his work with her. He had complained endlessly about the complexities of Petrocorp's South American operations, specifically their drilling sites in Ecuador. There were labyrinthine environmental regulations, land disputes with indigenous communities, and a notoriously corrupt local government. Marcus had dismissed these as soft issues, minor hurdles to be handled by the legal grunts. His focus, and Isabella's, was on the financials. The massive oil reserves, the profit margins, the shareholder value. They saw the world in spreadsheets and stock prices. They were blind to the human and environmental cost, not out of malice, but out of a supreme arrogance that believed such things were irrelevant to the bottom line. Emilia started digging. Using the legal research databases she still had access to from her alumni account, she began pulling every file she could find on Petrocorp's Ecuadorian division. She worked late into the night, long after Marcus had fallen asleep. The glow of her laptop screen, her only companion. She cross-referenced news articles from local Spanish-language papers translated indigenous land claim filings and scrutinized satellite images of the drilling sites. On the third night of her search, she found it. It was a single footnote in an obscure environmental impact report filed with a minor regional agency. The report detailed a recent shift in the local laws, a change enacted just 2 months prior that reclassified the land Petrocorp was operating on. It was no longer just commercial land. It was now designated as protected ancestral territory, following a landmark ruling in favor of the local Shuar people. The legal implications were explosive. According to the new statute, any existing commercial contracts would have to be completely renegotiated, with a minimum of 40% of the profits being redirected to a community trust. Furthermore, any environmental damage, past or present, would be subject to massive retroactive fines under the new, stricter regulations. Marcus and Isabella's entire merger valuation was built on the projected profits from those Ecuadorian oil fields. They were counting on a net value of over $10 billion. This new law didn't just reduce that value. It turned a massive asset into a catastrophic liability. The potential fines alone could run into the billions. Not to mention the public relations nightmare of being seen as exploiting an indigenous community. Their deal wasn't just flawed, it was a time bomb. And they were completely unaware of it, because they hadn't bothered to do the real on-the-ground due diligence. They had read the headlines, not the footnotes. Emilia printed everything. She compiled a dossier, clear, concise, and utterly damning. It included the new legislation, the court rulings, translated testimonies from community leaders, and a revised financial projection showing the multi-billion-dollar black hole in the center of their prized deal. The night before the gala, she sat in her silent living room, the finished dossier on the coffee table in front of her. Julian had delivered the dress which now hung in a garment bag in her guest room, a slash of crimson in the dark. Her transformation was nearly complete. She had the armor. She had the weapon. All that was left was the will to use them. For a moment, a wave of doubt washed over her. She thought of the man Marcus used to be the life they had built. Was she really going to destroy him? Then she thought of Isabella's email, the E-problem, keep her managed. She thought of the Cartier necklace, a prize for her replacement. She thought of the years she had sacrificed, the support she had given, all of it, erased and dismissed as a liability. Her doubt hardened into resolve. This wasn't just about vengeance. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming the narrative of her own life. They had written her out of their story. Now she would write the ending. The morning of the gala. Emilia woke before the sunrise. A strange sense of calm had settled over her. The frantic energy of the past few days had receded, leaving behind a quiet, unshakable purpose. She moved through the morning with deliberate grace, making coffee, reading the news, ignoring the palpable thrum of anticipation coming from Marcus's side of the apartment. He was a whirlwind of activity, barking orders into his phone, double-checking his speech, laying out his custom Tom Ford tuxedo. He was so consumed by his own impending triumph that he barely registered her presence. To him, she was just part of the furniture. "Wish me luck," he said, pausing at the door before he left for a final prep meeting at the office. He was already wearing his game face, confident, charming, predatory. "You won't need it," Emilia said, her voice even. "You're more prepared than anyone." He smiled, accepting the compliment as his due. "That's right. Tonight, everything changes." He winked at her, a gesture that was meant to be conspiratorial, but felt insulting. "Don't wait up." The moment the door clicked shut behind him, Amelia began her own preparations. There was no stylist, no fuss. Just a methodical, ritualistic transformation. She had booked an appointment at a salon under a different name, a chic, minimalist place in Soho that Julian had recommended. She walked in as Amelia Thorne, the quiet, unassuming wife, with her shoulder-length brown hair and practical no-fuss makeup. She walked out 3 hours later as someone else entirely. Her hair had been cut into a sharp, sophisticated bob that grazed her jawline and dyed a shade of deep sable that made her green eyes look like jewels. Her makeup was striking, but not overwhelming, a smoky eye, a nude lip and skin that seemed to glow from within. Back in the apartment, she laid out the dress. In the light of day, the red silk seemed to have a life of its own. It was more than a garment. It was a statement of intent. As she slipped it on, the fabric felt cool and heavy against her skin, a comforting weight. She looked at herself in the full-length mirror, and for the first time in years, she recognized the woman staring back. It was the woman she had been before Marcus, confident, intelligent, and fiercely independent. The past 10 years had buried her, but she had not disappeared. She accessorized simply. Diamond studs in her ears, her own purchased with her first bonus from the law firm, and a pair of killer heels that made her feel 6 feet tall. No necklace. Her throat was bare. She wanted the space left empty, a silent rebuke to the Cartier diamonds that would be gracing Isabella's neck. The final piece was the dossier. She had condensed the executive summary and key findings onto a single encrypted USB drive small enough to conceal in her clutch. The full printed report was in a sealed envelope addressed to Mr. Alistair Thorne, the Plaza Hotel security. A trusted courier arranged by Julian would deliver it at precisely 9 p.m., 1 hour before the speeches were scheduled to begin. At 7:30 p.m., she was ready. She stood once more by the window looking out at the city. But tonight it didn't look intimidating. It looked like a kingdom. Her kingdom. She had booked a private car to take her to the hotel. As she rode through the glittering streets of Manhattan, she felt no fear, only a profound sense of clarity. She wasn't a woman scorned seeking petty revenge. She was a CEO about to execute a hostile takeover of her own life. She arrived at the plaza and chose not to use the main entrance. Instead, she entered through a side door, leading to the residence, bypassing the red carpet and the throng of photographers. She had no interest in their cameras. Her audience was inside. She took a moment in a quiet alcove, her clutch in her hand, the weight of the small USB drive, a tangible reminder of her purpose. She could hear the muffled sound of the orchestra and the buzz of hundreds of conversations from the grand ballroom down the hall. Taking a deep, steadying breath, she began to walk. The doors to the ballroom were massive, ornate sentinels of gilded wood. As she approached, 2 ushers moved to stop her, their eyes politely questioning, searching for an invitation she did not have. She didn't break her stride. She simply looked at them, her gaze direct and unwavering. "I'm Mrs. Thorne," she said, her voice low and clear. "Please open the doors." There was something in her tone, a quiet authority, so absolute that they didn't question it. They looked at each other for a split second, then as if compelled by an unseen force, they each took a handle and pulled. The doors swung inward, and the wall of sound and light hit her. The grand ballroom was a sea of black ties and glittering gowns, a universe of power and influence. And as Amelia paused on the threshold framed by the doorway, a hush began to fall. It started at the back of the room and spread like a wave, a ripple of silence moving through the crowd as heads turned one by one. Conversations faltered. Glasses were lowered. The orchestra's melody seemed to thin and then fade away into nothing. In the space of 10 seconds, the entire room, 500 of the most powerful people in New York, had fallen completely silent. Every eye was on her. Across the vast expanse of the ballroom, she saw him. Marcus was standing near the stage, a glass of champagne in his hand, Isabella Ricci beside him. Isabella was radiant in a silver-sequined gown, the Cartier diamond and sapphire necklace blazing at her throat. They were laughing at something someone had said, the very picture of a power couple. Then Marcus felt the shift in the room. His smile wavered, and he turned his head, following the gaze of the crowd. His eyes found Amelia. The champagne glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the polished marble floor. The sound echoed in the cavernous silence. His face went white, a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. He stared at her as if he were seeing a ghost, a beautiful, terrifying ghost in a blood-red dress. Isabella, annoyed by the interruption, turned to see what had caused the commotion. Her practiced smile froze on her lips, her eyes widening in disbelief before narrowing into slits of pure venom. The necklace, her trophy, suddenly seemed garish and desperate. Amelia held their gazes for a beat longer. She had their attention. She had everyone's attention. Then, with a slow, deliberate grace, she began to walk into the room. Her heels clicked against the marble, the only sound in the dead silence. It was not the walk of a wife. It was the entrance of a queen. The walk across the ballroom floor felt like a mile. With every step, Amelia could feel the weight of 500 pairs of eyes on her, a mixture of confusion, curiosity, and sheer astonishment. Whispers started to erupt like brush fires in the silence. "Who is that?" "That's Amelia Thorne, Marcus's wife." "I don't believe it." "What is she doing here? I heard they were separated." She ignored them all. Her focus was laser-sharp, fixed on the stage at the far end of the room, and the two figures standing beside it, frozen in a tableau of disbelief. Marcus looked like he had been struck by lightning, his mouth slightly agape, his skin pale and clammy. Isabella had recovered more quickly. Her shock had morphed into a mask of icy fury. If looks could kill, Amelia would have been incinerated on the spot. Amelia didn't approach them directly. That would be too simple, too much like a domestic squabble. Instead, she changed her trajectory, moving towards the side of the room, where a formidable silver-haired man was standing, watching the entire scene with shrewd, intelligent eyes. Alistair Thorne, the patriarch of the family and the undisputed king of this empire. He was a man who valued control and order above all else. An unexpected disruption at his gala would be infuriating to him. Amelia was counting on it. As she approached, Alistair's expression was unreadable, a mixture of surprise and stern disapproval. He had always been civil to Amelia, but in a distant, formal way. He saw her, she knew, as little more than a necessary but unremarkable accessory for his ambitious son. "Amelia," he said, his voice a low rumble. "This is unexpected." "Alistair," she replied, her tone respectful but firm. She met his gaze without flinching. "I apologize for the unorthodox entrance. There's a matter of urgent corporate importance that I needed to bring to your attention personally." His eyebrows shot up. Corporate importance. My dear, this is a party, not a board meeting. Sometimes the two overlap, she said smoothly. A courier delivered a package to your security team at 9 p.m. I would urge you to review its contents at your earliest convenience. It pertains to the Petrocorp merger. Alistair's eyes narrowed. He was a man who could smell risk from a mile away. The seriousness in her voice, the utter lack of hysteria, had put him on high alert. He gave a curt nod, his gaze flicking over towards his son, who was now desperately trying to regain his composure. At that moment, the event's master of ceremonies, seeing the prolonged and awkward silence, decided to reclaim control of the evening. His booming voice filled the ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, a little unexpected excitement to keep us on our toes. And now for the moment we've all been waiting for. It gives me great pleasure to introduce two of Thorn Industries' brightest minds who have spearheaded a deal that will redefine our company for the next century. Please welcome to the stage the architects of the Petrocorp merger, Isabella Ricci and Marcus Thorn. A polite but slightly hesitant round of applause filled the room. The spell was broken. Marcus, jolted back to life by the announcement, shot Amelia a look of pure panic before plastering a shaky smile on his face and gesturing for Isabella to precede him towards the stage. Isabella ascended the steps with a predatory grace. She was a performer, and this was her stage. She straightened her shoulders, the Cartier necklace glittering under the spotlights like a weapon. She was going to seize back the narrative, to erase Amelia's disruptive entrance with the force of her own charisma. She stepped up to the podium, her eyes sweeping over the crowd, deliberately ignoring Amelia. Thank you. She began, her voice smooth as silk, radiating confidence. Tonight, we are not just celebrating another successful year. We are celebrating the dawn of a new era for Thorn Industries. She was brilliant. Amelia had to give her that. She spoke with passion and precision, outlining the strategic advantages of the Petrocorp acquisition. She painted a vivid picture of market dominance, of unprecedented growth, of a future where Thorn Industries was not just a player, but the undisputed leader in the global energy sector. The crowd was captivated. The whispers about Amelia's appearance died down, replaced by murmurs of approval. This monumental achievement, Isabella continued, her voice swelling, was not the work of one person. It required a team with vision, courage, and a relentless drive for excellence. It required a partner who was not afraid to take risks, to challenge conventions, and to work tirelessly towards a shared goal. She turned and smiled at Marcus, who was standing a few feet behind her, looking profoundly uncomfortable. Marcus Thorn is that partner. His support and leadership were instrumental every step of the way. The phrasing was clever. His support. She positioned him as her second, the helpful assistant to her visionary leadership. She was claiming the victory and the VP role as her own right here in front of everyone. In a different context, Amelia might have felt a flicker of satisfaction at seeing Marcus subtly undermined. Isabella's speech reached its crescendo. The Petrocorp deal isn't just a contract, it's a promise of a stronger, more profitable, and more powerful future for every single person in this room. Thank you. The ballroom erupted in thunderous applause. The disruption was forgotten. Isabella was triumphant. She had won. She stood there basking in the adoration of the crowd, the diamonds on her neck flashing like victory fireworks. She glanced towards Amelia, a small, triumphant smirk playing on her lips. It was a clear final dismissal. You lost. The MC stepped back to the microphone. Incredible thank you, Isabella Ricci. And now a few words from her partner, in this historic success, Marcus Thorne. Marcus walked to the podium, looking rattled. Isabella had just taken 90% of the credit for their shared project, and his wife, who was supposed to be at home, was standing in the audience, looking like a spectre at the feast. He cleared his throat, shuffling his notes. He was supposed to build on Isabella's momentum to seal their joint victory. But before he could utter a single word, Emilia began to move. She didn't run or shout. She simply walked from her position at the side of the room towards the small set of stairs at the front of the stage, her expression serene, her purpose clear. The crowd, sensing another shift in the drama, quieted once more. Marcus saw her coming. His eyes widened in terror. "Emilia, what are you doing?" He hissed his voice just loud enough to be caught by the microphone, a faint, desperate plea that echoed through the ballroom. She didn't answer him. She reached the stairs, ascended them with a regal calm, and walked directly towards the center of the stage. She stopped beside the podium, taking the second microphone from its stand. She stood there side by side with her husband's mistress, the betrayed wife and the triumphant lover, both bathed in the unforgiving glare of the spotlight. The silence in the room was absolute. It was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Isabella's smirk was gone, replaced by a look of sheer disbelief and rage. Marcus looked like he was about to faint. Emilia leaned towards the microphone. Her voice when she spoke was not loud, but it was so clear and steady that it carried to the farthest corner of the vast room. "Good evening," she said. "My name is Emilia Thorne, and I have a few notes on the presentation." The silence that followed Emilia's opening line was not just an absence of noise. It was a living entity, thick with tension and anticipation. Every person in the grand ballroom was holding their breath, waiting for the explosion. They expected tears, accusations, a messy public airing of a domestic dispute. It was the kind of delicious high society scandal they secretly craved. Emilia gave them none of it. She stood at the podium, a picture of composure, the crimson of her dress, a stark contrast to Isabella's shimmering silver. She was not a hysterical wife. She was an executive about to deliver a correction. Ms. Ricci's presentation was compelling. Emilia began, her voice calm and measured as she turned slightly to acknowledge Isabella. The use of the formal Ms. Ricci was a deliberate surgical strike. It stripped away the intimacy and recast Isabella as a mere professional colleague. Her passion is undeniable. However, in their relentless drive for excellence, it appears she and my husband have overlooked a critical piece of due diligence. A piece that doesn't just alter the valuation of the Petrocorp merger, but in fact turns it into one of the most catastrophic liabilities Thorne Industries has ever faced. A collective gasp went through the audience. This was not about an affair. This was about money. Billions of dollars of it. The mood shifted instantly from salacious curiosity to cold, hard fear. Investors gripped their wine glasses, their faces paling. Board members leaned forward in their seats. Marcus finally found his voice. "Emilia, stop this," he pleaded, stepping toward her. "You don't know what you're talking about." "On the contrary, Marcus," she replied, not even glancing at him. Her focus was on the audience, on the powerful men and women whose fortunes were tied to the company. "I know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about Ecuador, specifically Petrocorp's operations in the Sucumbíos province." She saw a flicker of recognition in Alistair Thorne's eyes. He was already connecting the dots. "While you and Ms. Ricci were focused on the top-line revenue from those oil fields," Emilia continued, her voice gaining strength, You seem to have missed the ruling of the Ecuadorian Constitutional Court on May 17th of this year. The ruling in the case of Shuar Nation vs. the Ministry of Energy fundamentally reclassified 2.5 million acres of land, including the land on which Petrocorp's primary drilling sites are located, as protected ancestral territory. She paused, letting the weight of that information sink in. She could see the confusion on the faces of the executives. This was obscure foreign legal detail. "What does this mean in practical terms?" she asked, her tone becoming that of a lecturer. "It means two things. First, under the new Indigenous Rights Act, any existing commercial contracts on this land are subject to renegotiation with a mandatory 40% profit-sharing agreement, payable to the Shuar Community Trust." A wave of audible shocks and curses swept through the room. The $10 billion asset had just had $4 billion wiped from its value. Isabella finally broke her stunned silence. That's a lie," she stammered, grabbing the podium for support. "Our legal team vetted everything." "That would have been flagged, would it?" Emilia countered, her voice turning sharp. "Did your $500 an hour New York lawyers read the footnotes in reports from a regional environmental agency? Did they translate the court filings that were only published in the local Spanish dialect? Or did they just read the English language summaries provided by Petrocorp's own internal team? The same team that had every reason to hide this inconvenient truth until the ink on your deal was dry." She didn't need an answer. The panicked look exchanged between Marcus and Isabella was answer enough. They had been played, and their arrogance had made them easy marks. "But it gets worse," Emilia said, her voice dropping, drawing the audience in closer. "The second implication of the ruling is the retroactive environmental liability. The new law allows for fines to be levied for all environmental damages incurred since the start of operations. Given Petrocorp's well-documented history of oil spills and deforestation in the region, my conservative estimate based on the fine per hectare schedule outlined in the statute places the immediate liability at approximately $6 billion. The room erupted. People were standing up, shouting questions. The $10 billion asset was now a $10 billion liability. The deal of the decade had become the poison pill of the century. Emilia raised her hand for silence, and miraculously, she got it. This information, including the relevant statute's court documents and a revised financial projection, was delivered to your chairman, Mr. Alistair Thorne, an hour ago, she announced. "I've also taken the liberty of putting the executive summary onto a drive." She held up the small USB stick from her clutch. "For your convenience." She then turned for the first time to look directly at Marcus. The man she had loved, the man she had built, was staring at her with a look of utter devastation. He wasn't just ruined, he was annihilated, and he knew in that moment that she had done it. Her gaze shifted to Isabella. The triumphant queen of the gala was now just a woman in a silver dress, her face a mask of horror, her career and reputation evaporating under the hot glare of the spotlights. Emilia's voice softened, but lost none of its power. It became personal, intimate, yet every word was a sahurhund, was a dagger meant for the entire room to hear. "This deal was built on a lie of omission," she said, her eyes locked on Isabella. "A dangerous, expensive lie, born of arrogance and greed. But that seems to be a recurring theme tonight." Her gaze drifted down to the glittering Cartier necklace. A beautiful piece, diamonds and a sapphire. A trophy, I imagine. A prize for a job well done. Isabella instinctively raised a hand to her throat, as if to hide it. But like the merger, it was meant to celebrate. Emilia concluded, her voice ringing with a final devastating clarity. It is built on a foundation of deceit, and anything built on such a foundation will eventually collapse. She placed the microphone carefully back on its stand. She didn't look at Marcus or Isabella again. She turned her back on them, on the stage, on the life they had tried to steal from her. In absolute silence, she descended the stairs. The crowd parted for her as she walked, a sea of stunned faces turning to watch her go. She reached Alistair Thorne, who was standing rigid, his face like a thundercloud. He looked at her, and for the first time she saw a glimmer of respect in his eyes. He didn't speak. He just gave her a single, sharp nod. It was all the confirmation she needed. Emilia continued her walk, her head held high, her steps even and unhurried. She walked through the parted crowd, across the marble floor, and towards the grand gilded doors. She didn't look back. She pushed the doors open and stepped out into the hallway, leaving behind the wreckage of 2 careers, 1 multi-billion-dollar deal, and a life that no longer belonged to her. The doors swung shut behind her, cutting off the explosion of chaos that erupted in the ballroom. The war was over, and she had won. The gala's implosion was immediate and spectacular. By morning, the financial world was ablaze with the story of Thorne Industries' averted catastrophe, and Emilia's name was on the lips of every analyst and news anchor. She was the brilliant, mysterious woman who had saved the company from itself. Ignoring the media frenzy, Emilia disappeared from the public eye, finding sanctuary away from the chaos. The consequences for Marcus and Isabella were brutal and swift. Acting with surgical precision, Alistair Thorne convened an emergency board meeting at dawn. Before the stock market opened, a press release announced the termination of the Petrocorp merger. Marcus Thorne and Isabella Ricci were fired for gross negligence, their careers publicly and irrevocably shattered. Isabella vanished. Marcus, disgraced, desperately tried to contact Emilia with a barrage of voicemails, swinging between remorse and rage. She deleted them all unheard and filed for divorce the next day. Her request was simple. She wanted nothing from their life together, but her freedom. In the following months, Emilia rebuilt. She secured a business loan, silently co-signed by a grateful Alistair, and opened a boutique consulting firm, Thorne Strategic Advisors. Specializing in ethical risk and corporate governance, her firm was an instant success. Poetically, her first client was Thorne Industries, who hired her to audit their international projects, paying her handsomely to prevent the very kind of disaster she had exposed. 6 months after the gala, Emilia was walking through Central Park. Her new life was her own, defined by a peaceful apartment in the West Village and work that gave her purpose. As she passed the Bethesda Terrace, she saw him. Marcus was sitting on a bench, a ghost of the man he once was. The tailored suits were gone, replaced by worn clothes. The arrogant confidence had been hollowed out, leaving behind only exhaustion. He looked up, and their eyes met. He didn't approach, but Emilia found herself walking toward him, compelled to close the final chapter. She stood before him, calm and confident. "Marcus," she said, her voice even. "Emilia," he rasped. "You look good." "I am good," she replied, the words a simple, profound truth. A heavy silence hung between them, filled with the ghosts of their shared past. "I'm sorry," he finally whispered, looking down at his hands. "For everything. I was a fool. I lost everything that mattered because I was chasing things that didn't." Emilia listened, not for him, but for herself. The apology was the final stone falling into place. "Yes, you were," she agreed, her tone devoid of malice. "But people can rebuild, Marcus. From ashes. I did." She looked at the man on the bench one last time, a stranger who wore a familiar face. There was no anger left, only a quiet sense of finality. "Goodbye, Marcus," she said softly. With that, she turned and walked away, into the autumn sunlight, not looking back. She was walking toward her future, a future built not from the ruins of his life, but from the enduring strength of her own. Emilia Thorne's story isn't just about revenge. It's a powerful testament to the strength that can be forged in the fires of betrayal. She walked into that gala as a wife who had been dismissed and underestimated, and walked out as the master of her own destiny. By refusing to be a victim, and instead using her intelligence and integrity as her weapons, she not only reclaimed her own life, but also exposed the corrupt foundation of the world that had cast her aside. Her journey reminds us that true power isn't about the name you carry or the wealth you possess, but about the unwavering strength of your own character and the courage to demand the respect you deserve. What did you think of Emilia's incredible transformation? Could you have done what she did? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit the like button. Share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength, and subscribe for more unforgettable stories.